This season is all about understanding fear, and we're going to kind of change it up a little bit because we're going to actually pick different core fears that people experience. So, for example, fear of abandonment, or fear of not being enough, or fear of judgment, fear of not being liked by other people. We're going to like go through all these different fears that people experience, and we're going to unpack those and talk about how to handle them, how to cope with them, and potentially even do some live coaching between Brian and I if we have a fear that we personally deal with and are in the process of handling and processing. Then you'll kind of get a feel of what it looks like to start to work through those and start to see progress in terms of fearing it less, or having that fear impact you less intensely than perhaps it would have in the past. So we're really excited to kind of work through these core fears, and we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, that's very exciting. You know, as you mentioned the live coaching part that we're going to do in future episodes, I felt a little like whoop of fear go up in me. And I love that stuff and doing it in front of people actually. And
Yeah,
still I got nervous, right? So like
because it's new.
because it's new. Yeah. And new is one of
Yeah.
the things. New is one of the things that can tend to trigger fear because it's
Mhm.
unknown.
Yeah, anything that's outside of your comfort zone, it will trigger a little bit of fear. So actually, I would like to do a episode on the comfort zone if we can fit it in. But
Great. Yeah.
today's episode is just all about giving a general overview and introduction to this topic. Obviously, all of us are aware that fear is a thing, but we want to kind of go into what is it, what's actually happening in your brain when you're experiencing fear. How does it affect your behavior? How does it affect your interactions with other people in your life? And actually, we'll probably get into relationships a lot because that that tends to be a space where fear pops up. And then we'll also talk about what's possible when we do start to handle and process those fears. What benefits or positives can we see when we start to work through them?
Yeah, because there are always benefits, even to the cruddy stuff, even to the muck, right? Like coming out on the other side of grief, there's benefits. Coming out on the other side of fear, it will be the same. We just have to figure out ways to deal more skillfully with fear, because when we respond to the presence of fear with more fear, we get kicked up into this cycle, just like the phenomenon of becoming anxious about your anxiety or becoming angry at yourself for getting angry, right? It
Yeah.
becomes sort of self-deepening loop of the negative emotion, or negative is the wrong way, but let's call it
Yeah.
unpleasant, right? Because it's not negative or positive cosmically, like societally, but it's unpleasant. So that's what I mean by it's the unpleasant emotions they have this self-deepening loop if you're not careful or skillful in noticing them and then starting to work with it.
Yeah, so that's essentially the goal of this season, is to prevent that deepening, that repression, that intensifying of a fear that we have, because it really, just like any number of emotions that we've already talked about, fear can become a bit of a spiral. It can become a self-reinforcing thing, and it can intensify itself, and that's what we want to prevent. We want to be able to take whatever fears we have and start to loosen and alleviate them.
Yeah, you know, it's one of the things that popped into my mind as you were talking about that, the image of the spiral, right? Like this self-reinforcing, deepening spiral, and it's deepening downward, like into more and more fear, right? But
Mhm.
as we learn to handle fear skillfully, one of the ways of handling fear has to do with sort of facing it in the moment, becoming
Mhm.
comfortable with its presence, understanding it more. And that, as you do all of those actions, what you're actually doing is strengthening the courage muscle. So it might not actually
Mhm.
feel like courage all the time when you're dealing with fear. It'll feel like you're crumbling under the weight of your fear the more you approach it. But the fact that you're approaching it is you strengthening your courage muscle. Courage is not defined by the feeling of courageousness. Courage is defined by the ability to continue making forward motion despite fear, despite intense fear. So courage, the features of courage are defined by the presence of fear. Does this make sense?
Oh, yes, and a note about courage. So I'm also touching back to some of the emotion stuff that we did before. A lot of people, because courage is a positive concept, there's a common assumption that courage feels good.
Right.
It does not. It does not feel good. Like if you
Exactly.
and I don't know why my brain goes to Hercules. I love Hercules, like the Disney movie. But if you think that it felt good for Hercules to like go and fight a bunch of titans. Like that does not, you're not, courage is not excitement. Courage is not like party. Like it's a very uncomfortable emotion, even
Yeah.
though it's a great thing to have.
Yeah, courage almost, I wonder, we didn't touch on it last season, but I wonder if it would even classify as an emotion, or if it's more about like a state dependent on decision making, right? Because it's
Oh yeah.
like you don't feel the courage like you're saying, you actually feel this other thing, like you feel more afraid, or you feel like, what the hell am I doing? Like I've got to come to my senses, but a deeper part of you knows you must go forward. And so that's the courage. The courage is that it's the impetus to move despite feeling really
Yeah.
shitty. Actually,
Exactly. Yeah. So, um, let's transition into talking about fear more directly. Did you have a definition you wanted to share? Or do we just want to talk generally about like the impact of it?
I have a definition, and I think we can use that as a foundation. So the dictionary says a very unpleasant or disturbing feeling caused by the presence of immense danger,
Mm,
or a state or condition marked by this feeling, which I found to be really
yeah.
interesting, because you can either have fear because of danger, which is fear in its proper context, or you can have
Mhm.
fear without the presence of danger, which is fear outside of its proper context and with less usefulness. So fear is useful. Fear is our friend. Fear has benefits just like every other emotion, but not always. Not when it's taking over and doing this other thing, right? We
When it's
can
out of
use
context.
when it's out of context. When it's out of context, we can still glean benefits, but the benefits come from the choice to go courageously into and understand why that fear that has no real context in the world, in your external world, why it's present. So you can have benefits from this non-contextual fear through
Yeah.
awareness practices. This fear within context is beneficial in and of itself. So that's the
Yeah.
difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so a lot when we're talking about it being taken out of context, it's not that there isn't a reason for a person to be feeling fear. I think what it really means is like if you have experienced something that leads you to believe that a situation could be dangerous, for example, in the past you experienced somebody abandoning you, then in the future when you have a secure relationship, you will fear that abandonment is a threat because you've experienced it before, but not necessarily because there's any indication in this present future situation that that is happening actively. But your brain, trying to protect you, will say, oh, this has happened before and you didn't expect it before. So now we're going to anticipate it and we're going to create fear to protect you against it happening again. But the unfortunate thing about experiencing fear out of context or based on a trigger is that sometimes what happens is we start to behave as if something is happening because we're fearing it will happen, and then
Mhm.
that can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like because I believe this is going to happen, I behave differently, and then
Yeah.
I can push people away from me because I'm so fearful.
Yeah, and if we're not careful, that is right. That's simultaneous process with the deepening fear loop. And then what happens is our mind has essentially at that point fully tricked us into thinking that the context that was not exactly the same as the context in which we experienced fear before was justified to experience fear within it, because we caused it to become true through our fear. So it's like we really want to unpack, I think, a little bit what it means, like the context, because
Yeah.
context, like in the example you gave, I could see a listener listening and going, okay, well, in the context of my past relationship, I got hurt. So in the context of this relationship, that's the same context. Of course I would have fear, but that's not actually
Mm,
what we mean by context, because that's a cognitive context. The
yes.
context is a here nowness thing. It's a present moment thing. And so it's like in the context of my relationship with person A, I got hurt. The only thing similar in context B is that I'm in relationship to a person. Like the
Yeah.
rest is different. It's a different time. It's a different person. I'm a different person. We know
Mhm.
different things about each other, right? So the context isn't actually the same. It just has similar features. And so I want to give
Yeah.
one example to really bring this home. It's like if you're out, if you see a tiger, right?
Mhm.
Immediately, you're going to have a fear response because in a certain context, and you know this, a tiger will kill you, right? But there's another context in which it's still a tiger, but it won't kill you. And that's like if you're visiting it at the zoo, for example. So
Right.
this is to draw that parallel to relationships. It's like the only thing similar in the context of the relationship that hurt you and the relationship that you're in now that has no signs of hurting you is that they both look like a tiger. Everything else about that
Yeah.
context is entirely different. This tiger was in the wilderness. This tiger is in a zoo, or
Yeah.
might, and we'll find out when you
Might be.
continue.
Yeah, we're not sure yet, which is why the fear is there because we don't know. And yeah, that's I want to run with this tiger example because when you're at a zoo, you might feel like a little bit of anxiety, but you wouldn't feel the same level of fear as if there was a tiger standing in front of you without a barrier between you. And it's
Yeah,
because your brain can identify signs and evidence that there's safety.
yeah,
And when we're experiencing fear in our relationships or in our everyday interactions or just in our assessment of ourselves, it's harder to give our brains concrete evidence that we are safe
yeah,
because
exactly.
there's no glass block wall. But part of handling these fears is learning how to identify evidence that convinces your brain that you actually are safe. But the risk of not doing that is that you may face many instances of your life as if there's a tiger and no barrier between you. And the way that you're going to behave in that situation is going to be very, very different from if you were to trust that you were safe.
Exactly. So that's huge. I'm so glad that you brought it right there because that's like, why is this important? Like, why is it such a big deal? Like, we all have fears. So who cares? Why are we talking about it? The reason we're talking
Yeah.
about it is because fear directly impacts the way we show up in the world. And not only is it just the way we show up in the world, but then the way we show up in our relationships with others. Like if I'm deeply controlled by fear, then I can't be the equanimical person I want to be with my family. I can't be the sort of loving uncle who shows up like with gregariousness if I'm living in fear. So it's like, but it's not like I'm not bad or wrong or to be judged if I'm living in fear, but I'm
Yeah.
suffering, and to be
Yeah.
liberated is so important, right? And I think this discussion is apt right now because there's like 1 in 4 people experience like a full-blown anxiety disorder in their lifetime, and 8% of the population at any given
Yeah.
time is experiencing PTSD. So fear in its various forms is like a huge aspect of our society. And another thing
Yeah.
about it is that it's actually, fear is so closely related neurobiologically and chemically to excitement and happiness. Like those states of high
Oh,
arousal in the
really?
body are very, very similar. And it's just like its context is the dividing line between whether you are in fear or excitement. Like at the zoo, it might not feel like excitement, but it will feel like joy, happiness, curiosity about the tiger, right? But another example in the reading I did this week was a haunted house. And that example can really bring home the idea of excitement and fear being the same,
Yeah.
because you go through the haunted house, you allow yourself to be afraid, but then you look right over at your friend who's laughing hysterically, and immediately there's that context. You remember you're safe, and you start laughing too. So you go from high fear to high excitement, like in the blink of an eye, because the context has changed so drastically for your brain.
Oh, yeah. That's
So,
interesting. I will admit that I've never been to a haunted house because I don't like being afraid.
okay, well, I know what we're doing next time I see you, so that's fun.
Okay.
Only if you're willing. Only if you're willing. No.
Maybe. I mean, it's outside of the comfort zone. Maybe I'll be less fearful if I try it once.
Yeah, yeah.
But
We'll go
yeah.
together. I'll laugh the whole way, so you'll have the
Oh
right
my
context.
god. Okay. So fear impacts everything, is what Brian was getting at. It can affect your stress levels, which means it can affect your health. It can affect the way that you show up in your relationships, which means it can affect the quality of your relationships or the closeness that you feel to the people that you care about. And so fear, it can also affect your ability to make decisions,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which
very
you can
much.
affect all kinds of things beyond that. But point being, when we leave our fears unaddressed, our quality of life decreases.
Yeah.
We experience more suffering. And so if we can address them, then we suddenly gain access to the ability to run our life the way that we want to rather than being controlled by this instinctual process that frankly shuts off your ability to like use logic. Like when you're we were going to talk about brain science a little bit here with how fear works, but essentially when your amygdala, the fear center, this little, I don't, it's like a very small part of your brain, like in
Yeah.
the core, we call it the reptilian brain, right? When the amygdala gets activated, it shuts off blood flow to your prefrontal cortex
Mm-hmm.
and prevents you from being able to use your logic brain.
Yeah, exactly. And so the work, that's exactly how it works. Like the amygdala and the neocortex. And in the reading I was doing this week, they were describing the amygdala as the animal brain, like, and the
Mm-hmm.
reptilian brain, right? And then the neocortex was like the human
Mm-hmm.
contextualizing brain is actually how they
Yeah.
put it. And so that's like the core of the work in order to help move through fear is to, you don't have to have a knowledge of how the brain works, but I find just understanding it sort of briefly actually helps me
Yeah.
sort of, because I can imagine internally what I'm pushing around in there. So that helps me. And like the idea is that the amygdala is fearful, right? Reactionary, doesn't even have access to the English language or whatever language you speak. It's
Yeah.
just taking like the partial context of tiger or relationship and making you
Mm-hmm.
afraid of it. And the job of the rest of your brain, this newer part of your brain, is to go, oh, wait, there's other context. That was a car backfiring, or remember we're at a zoo, or this person's different than the last person and they're not actually trying to get you. Like that's what the neocortex is trying to do to the amygdala. And so it takes practice like any other skill, because like what you were mentioning, the amygdala literally, its first line of defense is to pull all the blood away from that logical part. So
Yep.
the logical part is immediately a little debilitated as you end up in fear. And so, I'm going to give you guys an exercise towards the end here, but you don't practice this exercise with your dire fear because it would overtake you. You need to practice with something you're only a little afraid of, that it's not a big deal, so that you can feel the shift inside you from that mild panic back to normalcy. And then you're lifting the weight of, oh, I can add context even when my amygdala is going crazy. I can add context even when my amygdala is going crazy. Then you'll be
Yeah.
able to add that context with a little bit of a bigger fear and a little bit of a bigger fear, and eventually even with a full-blown phobia.
Yes. Yeah. And once you start to work through those fears, once you start to create those new neural pathways that makes it easier for you to calm yourself when any particular type of fear gets triggered, the result of that, or what it looks like once you've processed it, is it's not necessarily that you like will no longer have any thoughts about the thing that you fear. You'll probably still have some thoughts about like, oh, I'm afraid of this, or oh, I'm worried that this is going to happen. But the difference is those thoughts won't feel as powerful or compelling to you, and your amygdala won't get quite as activated. It won't get so intense that all of your other thought processes get shut down. So you'll find yourself being more able to brush those thoughts aside when you start to worry. You'll find yourself being better able to lean on the evidence that you don't actually need to be in fear. You'll be more quick to remind yourself that you're actually safe in this moment and that it'll be okay if you lean into whatever is happening rather than running away from it, or having some other fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. That it'll be okay if you don't go into one of those responses. And you'll also have a greater capacity to reassure yourself.
Yeah, which is so huge. It's like a superpower. I mean, again, we're actually talking about emotional regulation, but we're
Mhm.
talking about emotional regulation specifically in the fear response, which is I would say it's almost like the humanity's Achilles heel, even though it's also our
Yeah.
Midas touch, right? Like the fight or flight, freeze, fawn, flop response has kept us
Yeah.
alive. So it turns everything into gold in that sense, but it also debilitates us in this modern society. And so it's like our Achilles heel
Yeah.
also, right? It's this old
Hmm.
band scenario. And I want to tell this other story about context just to really bring home why it's so important to remind ourselves what's really true in the moment. So I've been held up at gunpoint a number of times in my life for whatever reason. Let's not blame it on the law of attraction, because I don't want that to keep happening to me. But this last time, I was in college and I was like in my junior year, and we're playing a poker game. There's like 7 of us in the room, And I found out later that my buddy Zach was about to win this massive amount of money with 4 of a kind sevens, but we never got to that because we got held up at gunpoint. So these guys burst into my house and they hold us up at gunpoint. But everyone in the poker game except me is part of an improv troupe on campus called the Sunshine Scouts. And so, you know, the robbers come in, one with a gun and one with a knife, and they're like, put your hands up. And everybody puts their hands up. I do not, though, because I'm so certain this is a practical joke from the improv troupe. Like, I'm certain of it. It's like, this is, you guys, this is so lame. I'm like, that's clearly Ryan and Joe, like, behind the mask. And it was not. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm like completely just cavalier, and they've all got their hands up, and I'm just sitting there chilling. Like, can this be over? I want to get back to poker. I mean, you guys are funny, but
Oh my
whatever.
gosh.
And then the guy puts the gun in my face, and I feel like the cold steel on my temple. And he goes, "Do you think this is a joke?" And I was like, "Whoop. No, I do not." But until that moment, I did think it was a joke. And so
Yeah.
prior to that moment, there was zero fear within me.
Yeah.
After that moment, when I had the real context and knew the real danger was there, there was only fear within me, like nothing but fear. And so much fear, in fact, that my buddy, I will leave him nameless because he hates this part of the story, but we all had our arms up and they were like, "Is there anything else? Do you guys have anything else?" They took all the money and he's like, "Here's my wallet. You guys can have my wallet." And they were like, thank you. They took it. And then he goes, "Come on, guys. You guys almost have wallets too. Let's give him our wallets. I think there's laptops in the other room." And we're all like, "Dude, shut up." So in terms of how fear can brain fog you and affect your decision making, I think we can all agree it was not a good decision to send them after other people's wallets and then to send them into other rooms of the house to look for more stuff. And yet that's what fear did in that moment.
Oh my gosh. That poor person. I'm sure everybody was pretty frustrated with him after that.
Oh man, we didn't let him live that down for like years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we were jerks.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. But the interesting thing I want to zoom in on a moment in that story is that there was a moment where your perception of all of you in that room are in the same context.
Yeah.
Your perception of the context is opposite of everybody else's perception because everyone else is aware that there's real danger. And so fear is not actually dependent on whether danger is present.
It's true. Oh my God, it's so
dependent.
true.
Yeah, because it was truly present, but they felt it and you didn't. And then it shifted once your perception of the context changed. And
Yeah.
so if we were to take an opposite of that, how often, and I would say more often than not, are we perceiving danger or our brain is perceiving danger? Not, it's not your fault. It just happens because our brains like to make assumptions and draw conclusions from whatever information, it's taking on. But how often is there not actually presently danger?
Yeah.
And we feel like there's a tiger and we feel like there is. And so our brains react as if it is life threatening, as if it is, we're going to be, ostracized by all of our friends and they're not going to like us and somebody's going to leave me and I'm not safe here. So I want to run away and all of these things. And so you can find yourself behaving and reacting based on your perception of reality that doesn't match what's actually happening.
Yeah. Because fear has this proclivity to like shrink that space between stimulus and response, and we become more and more and more reactive. But we can practice becoming more and more decision oriented in those moments, right?
Yeah.
Let's contextualize. I have an exercise I could share that could help people. So I'm just calling this transmutation of fear. It's just sort of a little step-by-step process I've cobbled together from things that have worked for me and things I read that I'm going to try. So in full transparency, I have yet to use this exercise exactly fully how I've outlined it for you, but I've used pieces of it many times and I'm going to do that this weekend. So we can talk next week about how it goes. And I would love if other people want to put in the comments next week about how this works for them. But basically what it is, it's going to involve your nervous system, your body, and your mind all in one. And so there's 4 steps to this. Step 1 is to sit comfortably and just start gently rocking back and forth with one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. So it's just like this, just like really simple, right? If you have a rocking chair, great. If not, you can be in whatever the most comfortable for you, or recliner.
Rocking chair.
Yeah. So that's it. That's step 1. Like you're already nailing it, right? And then step 2 is tell the truth about the fear. So Without awareness of what you're afraid of, you can't go further. So it's like if you're sitting there, you know you're afraid and you don't know why, you've got to sit with it for a minute. And then when you do, you can say, okay, the truth is I'm afraid of failure, or I'm afraid of this person coming home and yelling at me, or I'm afraid of whatever it is, whatever comes in, and that's the truth. Worst case scenario, you can't tell. And even in that scenario, it's not about figuring it out. The point of this step is to involve the truth with you. And so if you really can't tell while you're fear what it is, you can still tell the truth. You can say, I really don't know what I'm afraid of, but I am afraid. So you're telling the truth still, right? If you can know, it's better. It's just a little further along the awareness chain if you can figure it out. But if you can't, it's okay. The truth is the main thing of step 2. Rocking back and forth, getting into your body, and then tell the truth. And then step 3 is so step 2 is to contextualize it. So once you've told yourself the truth, you ask if, despite feeling this fear, is there any imminent danger in this moment? Like in the next few minutes? If yes, deal with it. Don't keep sitting there rocking, go run away from the tiger. But if there is not any imminent danger, then move on to step 3. And step 3 is to contemplate the immediate consequences of your fear in this rocking place, in this gentle place, without judgment. And you just ask yourself, what are the results of continuing to nurture this fear right now, despite there being no imminent danger? And you let it come. You just let that hit you. What are the consequences? It's okay. What are the results? Just sit with them. What happens? What will your day be like? And then ask yourself the next question. What are the results of taking action and getting on with my day now, despite the fear also being present? You're not forcing yourself to get on with your day. You're just asking. And so you invite that awareness in. What is the result of moving on, even if fear comes along? And then step 4, after you've just sat with those possibilities, you've taken no action yet. You notice if and how your body shifts in relation to the new context. If you sense some slight easing, then you're on the right track. If not, then you just continue to sit with the truth of what you fear while gently bringing in more and more of the safe context in which you are now sitting, with phrases, I'm safe in this moment. I can think more clearly without fear. My fear is not my enemy, it is my teacher. I'm safe. I'm safe. Like that kind of thing. The caveat to step 4 here is if you're doing this, the sort of mantras, because you're trying to bring in more safety, you must only choose contextualizing phrases that feel true to you, because it's step 2. You are bringing in the truth. It's very specific. You bring in the body, then you bring in the truth, then you bring in the fact that there's no immediate danger, and then you recontextualize in that order with the truth always there. So if it doesn't feel true for you to say, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, then don't. You can say something like, I have a right to feel safe. I'm meant to feel safe. I'm allowed to feel safe. Pick a phrase around that leads towards safety that feels true, but don't lie to yourself. If you lie to yourself, you might actually kick up more fear.
Cool. Thanks for that, Brian.
Yeah. So give it a try, and I'm going to try it myself, and we can all talk next week about how it goes.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, and I think the main point of that is if there is any aspect of your cognitive logical brain that can perceive that there is no present threat, then we want to reinforce that with evidence, because then you're creating new neural pathways that reinforce that you don't have to be in fear. But until we reinforce those neural pathways, the strongest reaction is going to be the fear itself. So fear's in control. We're trying to build up the strength of the logic brain until this part can chill out.
Yeah, exactly. And also, as in that process of chilling out, you may have a good long period of your life where the fear is there, but you're managing to walk forward with it. That's actually okay too, right? Our goal is not to annihilate the fear necessarily, but to make it so it's not debilitating or controlling every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mo, thank you. Yeah, this was really interesting conversation for me, and I learned a lot just from hearing you talk too. So thank you.
Same but you.
So everybody, thank you so much for being here.